Here we go. Well, I'd be surprised if there's anyone in New South Wales left who hasn't heard me talk about the waste regulation. So I apologise if this is number 2 or 3 for you. It's probably number 40 for me. So I thought today I would keep it a little bit high level because there's lots of information out there about the detail in the changes and really go through some of the why of the changes that we're putting in place. I put this slide in most presentations that I give because I think it clearly articulates the key policy objectives in relation to waste in New South Wales, one being the protection of the environment and human health from the inappropriate use of waste, and the other being to drive greater levels of waste avoidance and resource recovery in line with our waste strategy. We hold both of these objectives in a slight bit of tension, actually. And as an EPA in New South Wales, we have responsibility for both of these things, unlike in other jurisdictions where they're clearly delineated into different government agencies or bodies. We've been through a patch of, I'd say hell, but probably also the Holy Grail in terms of policy and development in terms of where we've been positioned in New South Wales over the last few years, and that is that we've been able to align our policy programs and our legislative agendas. So end of last year we released our waste avoidance and resource recovery strategy, which contains our targets in relation to rates of recycling, but also around problem waste, litter and illegal dumping, which really gives us the platform from which to leverage our program work, which is of course our Waste Less Recycle More initiative, $465.7 million. I'm sure you've heard about that to death as well. But we've also had that opportunity in this time frame to review our legislation in accordance with our subordinate legislation requirements. And the importance of doing that is to really support those other two parts, which is our strategy and our funding, because you really need a robust regulatory framework and a robust waste market in place where there's a level playing field in order to be able to achieve the right objectives in this space. And I think that's well articulated by a quote now from an old report by ICAC called Taking the Whiff Out of Waste, which basically calls the waste industry the environmental gatekeepers of the state, because there's immense harm that can be caused with waste, either deliberately or inadvertently. And they identified back in 2002 that there was a real need for an increase in professionalism across the industry in order to maintain that level of environmental health. And that comes right back to our key objectives. So we've really framed the changes that we've made in the 2014 Waste Reg as about bringing about a modern waste industry and bringing about a step change. And those are kind of the key parts that we've focused on through the consultation and the communications that we've had in relation to the Waste Reg. They include a level playing field, setting minimum standards, regionalising waste management, better environmental outcomes and utilising technology. And for the remaining however long I've got of this talk, I'm going to concentrate mainly on the first two. And this is really about, for us, setting that level playing field across the waste industry, because it's a very price-driven industry. It's susceptible to what I call the dodgy pool table effect. So as soon as one leg is slightly shorter than the other, in terms of lower costs, being able to operate, due to operators being able to operate outside the law, that's where the pool balls run, and it can really destabilise your legitimate operators in the sector. So one of the key things we did was to lower our licensing thresholds. So they were previously 2,500 tonnes on site at any one time for waste processing, storage or treatment, or 30,000 tonnes per year, and we've significantly lowered those to 1,000 tonnes and 6,000 tonnes per year. And that's really to capture a large slice of the industry which to date has been unregulated by the EPA, regulated by council, but has been having an impact sector-wide and in terms of those pricing discriminations and the activities that they've been carrying out. Over the last 3 months, as we've been implementing the changes to the 2014 reg, which commenced on the 1st of November, we've gone out and visited about 100, just over 100 of these sites to see whether or not they need to be licensed under the new thresholds. And the survey results, of which I'm going to run through today as a bit of a precursor as to why this step change is really needed across the industry. So one of the questions that our officers asked them when they went out to visit these sites was, how does waste flow through your site? And some honest bastards said, oh, we just stockpile it. And others had various other responses. But we have had this situation across the industry where we have had essentially above-ground landfills in operation where operators are taking waste onto their site, pocketing the money at that point in time and then walking away from the site, or managing large stockpiles of waste with no intention to reprocess them. So under the waste reg, we've introduced an expansion of our waste levy, which previously only applied to waste disposal facilities, and we've increased that levy to now apply also to all recycling, storage and processing facilities within the regulated area. Unlike the landfill levy, this is not a payment that's incurred when waste is received, it's a liability that's incurred when the waste is received, and that's then extinguished when waste moves back off-site for legitimate reuse or further processing. So this is really about putting a $120 tonne, if you like, price on that waste, and the levy is only triggered for payment on that liability where waste sits on that site for more than 12 months or where it's stockpiled above lawful limits. And that commences on 1st of August 2015. Another question that we asked these operators is how is waste measured in and out of the site? And there was about 18% of these operators that use weighbridge or load cells. Around 3% they don't measure them. 6% use guesswork. And I don't know what the other factor is that they're using to determine the weight of their waste. But this is really a catalyst, I think, for us to ensure that there is actual robust data within the industry. And so a requirement under the regulation is that for those levy-paying facilities, or the facilities that will be liable to pay the levy, by the 1st of February, they're required to have a weighbridge in place at their facility. Still another question that we asked was, how do you determine how much waste is at the site at any time? So for legitimate business operators, you'd think that stock management is a key part of what they do and what they know, particularly for invoicing and so on. Around 19% had paperwork or computer records that they could use. 7% don't even know how much they've got on site at any one time, and 22% use estimates, just being visual estimates. So this is really kind of the rationale or the grunt of why we need this industry to really take a modern approach and to take a step change in how it does business. The guy with the bum bag writing his invoices on the back of a beer coaster is not where we want this industry to be, because it's got a lot of money at play, and it's also got significant environmental risks and human health risks associated with the material that they take and move around. So in response to this, we've got our levy liability, but we're also putting reporting requirements on these facilities, and they'll have to submit online reports regularly in relation to the waste that they're receiving on and taking off their site, which again, any legitimate business should already be doing, and that comes into account on the 1st of August as well. Here was another question we asked them was, do you test the recovered outputs that you are generating on your site, and it was around 60% did no testing, so we're sending out recycled materials into a market. We have resource recovery exemptions that we use, that we've made some amendments to split them into orders and exemptions, where orders will now apply to generators or suppliers of exempted material, and the exemptions will continue to apply to the consumers of those materials that set basic standards of play. So again, a worrying indication that there's not a large percentage of the industry, and certainly this sector of the industry, who are following regulatory guidelines and specifications. The other thing that will now be required of these, particularly the all licensed facilities, is to undertake record-keeping requirements, and that will include requirements such as, if you are sending waste off-site under resource recovery exemption, where is that going, how much of it is it, and under what exemption is that being sent off under. So for the first time, we'll actually have records around the movement of these recovered materials as well within the state. So the outcome of that is really, as I've been saying, to see a step change across the industry, such that our waste facilities are now largely going to be regulated by the EPA. They're going to weigh accurately the amount of waste coming in and out of their facilities. They will be required to report and record the information in relation to waste data. So we'll start to see a large amount of data coming through that we previously haven't had access to. The outcome of that, particularly in relation to the data aspect, is under our waste strategy. We have those targets around recycling and recovery. Previously, the only robust data that we had in this field came from our waste disposal data from our levy-paying landfills. Now we're going to have a lot more robust data as to the materials that are recycled and therefore generated in the system as well. That's a snapshot from our soon-to-be-released infrastructure strategy. So the fact that we'll have more data around where waste is moving across the state and the types of waste means that we have more data to make decisions on investment, grants, infrastructure, etc. And from a regulation and enforcement point of view, we will also be able to see how much waste is sitting in facilities at any one time, how much waste is moving in and out of those facilities. And probably more importantly too is establishing those hierarchies and relationships between various operators within the waste sector, which again previously has been opaque and as a regulator presents some good opportunities for us. For further details, there's at the top a link on our website to a variety of fact sheets and more detailed information about the changes that we've made to the waste reg. If you're not otherwise subscribed to our Waste Updates email subscription list, I'd strongly advise that you are. It gives details around grant funding, but also legislative changes and policy updates. Or you can contact us at that email address if you've got any questions, particularly around how the regulatory changes may apply to you or your business. That's it.